Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm in Colombia right now. I'm speaking with Jorge Salas. He is the CEO and founder of New Paths Expeditions. Jorge, where are you calling us from?
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Jason. I am right now in a little farm in the south of Peru, south of Lima, about 3 hours to the south of Lima. This is very close to the Ballestas Islands. Those who have visited might have been there. It's the Ballestas Islands and very close to Pisco, from where you take the flights to see the Nazca lines.
All right. Very, very cool. So is this, you said a farm, is this a family farm or your place or?
Yes, well, I'm originally from Peru, and my father had this farm, and we're close to during the pandemic, we came to spend it here, and I have a daughter, and we live here. Of course, when I'm not on a plane and traveling, gladly we have a moving life. These are during the holidays, we normally spend it here when we can, and that's where we are right now. Beautiful,
very cool. All right. Sounds very nice. It sounds like a great place to spend the pandemic as opposed to where many people were at. So, because I assume farm, you can go outside and do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about somebody. Anyway, we don't want to talk too much about that. Jorge, I'm really super fascinated by your story, and I want to go back a bit to kind of help our listeners kind of figure out, how did you get from where you were to where you are now? We'll talk more about where you are now, but let's start in the beginning. How far back do we need to go to kind of understand you?
Well, it started very young. I'm 52 at the moment, and have been in the industry for 32 years. So that tells you that I started very, very young. I was lucky to be in the area of Chile. I'm originally from Peru, and I always had this passion. I think that the previous persons that you have interviewed here has mentioned that they started their passion. They started to dream about a life of travel through National Geographic.
Yeah.
I received a gift from my grandfather, who was a world traveler, and of his collection, very old pieces. So I started, and I always said I want to be a photographer. I want to work be a wildlife photographer. And then when I was studying business administration, I started to do rock climbing. And of course, I was in Chile at the moment, and I ended up spending my summers in Patagonia. My best friend, and I'm going to mention him because we started our careers together that long ago, Sergio Bahamondes, he's still in the industry also. And we started going there as waiters for hotels that were starting to pop in Torres del Paine National Park. And we were the first 2 guides for one of the leading hotels, still is. We were the first 2 guides for that hotel. And very soon we started to do mountain climbing and then mountain guides. And then we started becoming hiking guides, and we did some crazy things. We were very young. We did one of the first descents in rafts of some of the rivers in the park when it was legal. And it was a fascinating time. And then leader of one of the old companies of mountain companies, hiking companies. I got sick. I had very good English or relatively good. And so I took his position to save the situation. And the group really liked what we did. And we continued with that group. And then we started to work for several American companies, left for a little while because of personal projects. And eventually I went back to working for an Australian-British company. We did this young 18 to 35-year-old groups around South America overland, and which were quite interesting. And then after a while, I was called by a U.S. company to start leading trips for them, when ended up in the Amazon. And to make it short, we We ended up running the operations of 5 Amazon cruises there. And little by little, we got other degrees. This company was bought by other company who bought a lot of brands in the US. We got a lot of training from them. Then gladly, I got a mentor, Greg Greer, which he hears this. I want to send him my best. He took me under his wing and took me around the world. And they started to do Papua New Guinea, Madagascar. Of course, at this point, I had all of South America, and they started to go around the world and as to leading these trips, all in natural history focus at this point, no more mountains, and working for Americans and American companies. And then I started to climb in this company and ended up having managed the product development. I was the crisis manager and did a lot of other things, built ships, but eventually I was starting to, was in the purchase of some companies. I have a degree in finance also, and at that point, and I was starting to spend time between traveling and having to wear a suit. And then my daughter came 10 years ago, and I became a father, and I realized that things had changed. It was too corporate. And I felt that things were changing in the businesses that for which I was working at the time. And I wanted to go back to the field. I had these ideas about small groups, remote destinations, where I had a lot of experience because of handling crisis and going and developing trips in very remote destinations. So I had an expertise in that, in these countries that not a lot of companies go. So that there was a moment, there's a lot of competition in the world, but there's not a lot of people that want to go or don't know that they want to go to these destinations, like Papua New Guinea, like Madagascar that I mentioned, Ethiopia. But we have an expertise. There might not be such a bigger market, but we have less competition. And that's where we want to go. And let's do it in small groups. And I had this dream and I took the leap of faith and resigned to the corporation and started New Paths Expeditions 10 years ago. And we did our first trip that was Ethiopia. Then afterwards, Madagascar, then Papua New Guinea, then Mongolia, and we kept on going. Now we are on our 10th year anniversary, and we grew faster than we planned, but steadily, not too fast, faster than we planned, but not too fast. So we were able to maintain quality, the same standards that we had planned to provide since the beginning. And now we are 10th year and 58 destinations afterwards, talking to you from a farm in the south of Peru after returning from Guatemala and about to start a Kingdoms of Peru trip right after New Year's Eve.
All right. Wow. Very cool. So that's quite a journey. I had a few questions that came up during that. I want to go back a little bit because I was really intrigued by, you mentioned National Geographic, had several people that I've spoken with that played some sort of role for them. You said it was your grandfather, right? They had given you the National Geographics. Correct. Was he a traveler? What was his attachment to that? I want to learn more about that.
He was, sadly, he's not with us anymore, but he was quite a unique story. And he ended up going through many positions in Peru and then afterwards globally. And he had an important position in the United Nations. And this was in the formative years, the second period of the United Nations. So lots of new countries appearing, and he was involved in all this. So he had to travel a lot. And I remember as a young kid going to the airport and seeing these Lufthansa planes leaving and taking my grandfather away. And then him coming back after 3 months for just 3 days of a visit. Lots of chocolates for all of the grandkids, a couple of stories, and a couple of National Geographic magazines, and then leaving again. And we will all go in those years. It was a big event going to the airport. So going and seeing these planes and seeing these people traveling, and it was the golden era of flights. So it was quite unique. And I always wondered what was happening once he took these planes and all these different cultures that he will talk about. And then one day he gave me as a gift his collection, which was quite big, of National Geographics. So once I was 12 or 13, I would spend Sundays and after school just going through these magazines and just dreaming about exploring the world.
Yeah.
And gladly we were able to do that, what we always wanted.
You certainly did. Do you remember at that age, were you able to envision maybe working in the tourism or travel industry? Or was it just more of like, I want to go see these, I want to go travel the world? But I mean, did you I guess what I'm saying is when you're growing up, did it occur to you that you could actually make a living doing this, or was that just kind of, you learned that later?
At that, Jason, I don't think that I had an idea about making a living. I was still too young. But I remember saying, I'm going to be, it's one day telling my mom, I'm going to be a National Geographic photographer.
Well,
I
that's, yeah,
remember
you
saying
mentioned that. Yeah.
That's something
Yeah.
that I remember saying. But I have to recognize that I feel extremely lucky and blessed because I still have my grandmother who's 100 years old, and we are
Wow.
very, very close. And not long ago, and I remember this when hearing some of your previous podcasts today before, and that she told me, no, you are very, very lucky because she pulled out a letter that I sent to my father in 1994, telling him that I was not coming back to Peru, that I was not going to the US where I had a scholarship, but that I was staying in Patagonia and that I was going to start my own travel business with the small groups to remote destinations and basically exactly what I'm doing now. And that is something that I completely forgot. And it was a lot of fun. This was about 3 weeks ago, I think, that she pulled this letter out and said,
Wow.
do you realize that you envisioned this long time ago? And I completely forgot. But I think that once I was somewhere in the 19 years old, I knew that I wanted to be in the travel industry. And we just kept on going, and gladly we're here.
What do you said you kind of had forgotten about the letter, but I'm sure you kind of remember at that point in your life how your parents did respond or how you thought they were going to like, I'm envisioning you sitting there writing this letter and you're in a camp somewhere in Patagonia, writing this letter like, Dad, I figured it out and this is what I'm going to do, whether you like it or not. Do you remember worrying about how he was going to receive that or what he was going to think? Or I want to hear more about that.
Absolutely. I remember myself sitting on the floor of this crew quarters at this lodge and writing this letter because I had to go back and I had the ticket that he helped me to purchase at the moment. And I said, I'm
Okay.
not getting on board. I'm so sorry. He was very kind because I got an opportunity and he provided some help. And I'm so sorry, but this is what. So I was very nervous. It was a long letter. It was a long letter trying to explain myself. But no, he never answered. But he and basically there were no cell phones or emails at the time, so I never got a letter back. But I kept on doing what I planned. And afterwards, of course, we kept a very close relationship with my father, and he was always supporting. He's a person that made us, and not made us, motivated us to work since very, very young. And so I think he already knew that if I was walking that path, it's because I already had a plan that I was decided to.
What did you go to school for the first time? I mean, you mentioned finance, but I don't know if that came later. So when you left home, like, okay, I'm going to school now, what was your plan?
I went to university in Chile, but I started very young, working since I was 11 years old, 10 and a half, at a family restaurant. And so I was always in service and I always felt comfortable and attending guests. So I think that helped a lot also. And then I went to Chile to study, and afterwards I spent some time in the U.S. But before,
I'm curious though, what were, like, when you went to school in Chile, what was your major? What were you intending?
Well,
what did your father think you were going to go do? I guess is what I'm asking.
Hotel management, and then we convalidated courses to hotel and tourism management, and then we convalidated courses to get business administration, which is how it's called here, or it was called here. And then later I did graduated courses in Cornell for marketing and finance.
Okay. So it's not like you left home to go to school to be a lawyer and your dad was excited about that. And then you're like, yeah, I'm in Patagonia. I'm never leaving. Or it wasn't quite that dramatic.
No, but it was always my life. As I tell you, I think that the first job that I got as a waiter was legal at that time. It was 10 years old. And then we started to move in other positions.
All right. Restaurant. Was your dad, would you classify him as adventurous, a wanderlust type, or was he, how would you describe him?
Oh, yes. He was quite a unique individual. Sadly, he left us during the pandemic. So and we are close to him. We remember him every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was a fantastic person, quite a unique life. He actually he was a those years in Peru were very difficult, and everybody had to migrate from the Andes, those of us who come from the Andes, to the coast. And that happened around the time that I was born, and he was very young, with a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to remake his life in Lima, which is the capital city, and at the time had 50% of the population. Because of all those bad years, everybody migrated. But then eventually, after some success, gladly, he decided to leave everything and go back to the original town from where my family comes from, which is called Huancavelica. And it's the poorest city in Peru at the time. And he became the mayor, leaving everything behind. And after that, he became the governor. But no one, he thought that his connections in Lima will allow him to obtain assistance for such a poor area of the country. And sadly, he didn't. He got the response of, poverty is not news at that time, sadly. And then, so he decided, look at this, he decided to get on a horse. Our family, we all love horses for generations. And he decided to get on a horse and then get 350 native people from the Andes, from Huancavelica. And they rode 500 kilometers to Lima. He started with 350 and he entered Lima with 65,000 people. And
holy cow.
So if you're asking
me
about
chills, man.
Whatever I do or we do, it's hard to beat that one.
So the grandfather that you mentioned earlier was your dad's dad?
No.
Okay, I was just curious because I'm thinking you got some interesting people in your family.
From both sides.
All right,
it's been fun.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's a great story. Okay, I forgot what my other questions were going to be after that story.
Actually, I do want to mention one more thing of my father, because this is being recorded, and I want to finish the story. He ended up being the prime minister of the country after that. So it was.
Oh wow!
See that took him to that position, to which he ended up. And actually, at the end, before the end of his life, not many years before that, he returned to Huancavelica and kept on working on what was his life project. So sorry, I wanted to finish the story because.
Oh, I'm happy you did. I didn't want to cut you off. So thank you. Yeah. And one of the great things about, the conversations like what we're having now is, other people need to hear those stories, right? So I'm sure people in your family have heard the stories, but this is something that, will be around for a while. So someday your grandkids can be listening to it and hearing about their great grandfather or whatever, however that falls in. So that's pretty cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. So, okay. Totally derailed. What do you want to talk about, Jorge?
Well, let's talk about travel.
All right.
That's our cup of tea.
Hey, I was actually, and travel is about connection, right? And so that's what's great about it. For me, anyway, it's the connection part of it is such a critical part. If you said to me, like I've never been to Machu Picchu, and if somebody says, well, you can go to Machu Picchu, I know it's just down the road. I'm in Colombia. You're not far away. If someone said to me, you can go to Machu Picchu, you'll have the whole place all to yourself. You can do the whole Inca Trail and hang out at Machu Picchu, and there won't be anyone else around to bother you. You'll just be by yourself. I'd be no thanks. Honestly, that just doesn't appeal to me, because for me, it's about sharing the experience. I'm not saying I want 400 people, I'm not saying I like crowds, but for me, having an experience by myself is just like only half the deal. It's like, I gotta share it with someone. That's why I worked as a guide, and I've done the guiding. I was a fishing guide in Montana. I love to fish, but I was always much happier taking other people fishing, watching them catch fish and sharing that experience with them. I get that. So, or that's my take on it anyway. What do you think?
Well, I totally agree with you. The trip is, most of it is who you experience it with, of course. And that's something that I don't think that is changing. But you just touched a subject that I have been speaking quite a bit in recently with partners and guests and groups of guests. Because after the pandemic, we do at New Paths Expeditions remote destinations, as I mentioned, in small groups that balance nature and culture, and lots of content and luminaries and experts that as lecturers. But after the pandemic, and of course, we also do private trips, for families, couples that requested. But we have seen an increase in the private trips and families that used to go in small groups. Our groups are normally 10, 12, no more than 16, and that's only when we have a ship. that we have to fill, and it's a 16-person ship that's in Papua New Guinea when we go to those numbers. So it's normally 10 or 12. And so we started to see people requesting family trips only for them rather than going in our small groups. And something that I'm repeating constantly lately, that is fantastic. But there's something that with the small groups, and especially with the small groups the size of ours, is that you still have this intimate experience. You still have this guides and leaders that are top notch, that are really providing information, that have master's degrees, PhDs, that are traveling with, and we provide them also for the local guides for the private trips. But in a lot of our destinations, because we can have these numbers of 10 or 12, we can divide the cost of, for example, closing the Sphinx and having Sahi Hawass, the main archaeologist, being able to give you a lecture before anyone else enters the area. Or going to the Lady of Kao, which is the oldest female ruler of the world, actually, that has been found. And it is in northern Peru, which is a fascinating destination. Everybody talks about Machu Picchu, but Peru has so much more. Being able to go to the back of the house of the archaeological research facilities and see mummies and pottery and amazing textiles that are not being presented at the museum because there are so many, but they are being under research at the moment, and to participate and spend a couple of hours with them. Or for example, I just returned from visiting Walter Alva, the discoverer of the Lord of Zipan, the Tutankhamun of the Americas. I just returned with my daughter from a wonderful 10-person group from Guatemala. And we had Francisco Estrada Bell spending, the main Mayan archaeologist in activity today, spending time with us in all the Petén area where Tikal and Huachatún and Yaksha are located. If we would to do that without having a year to plan and without being able to divide the cost among a group of 10 or 12, those experiences would be very difficult to provide for a small group. So we can provide fantastic itineraries. That's what I love the most of my work, is to curate the trips and then being able to have a small group and add these elements, these components, make the experience much richer. So we end up, Traveler and we are very lucky because we started as a club. New Paths Expeditions started as a traveling club. We have the majority of our guests have met each other during trips, and then they have become friends, and then they decide to go on another trip together. So we call them the families. I would say we have about 8 or 9 that are constantly deciding their next trips together. And this allows us to prepare these unique experiences for them and see them becoming friends and life friends. And that's one of the biggest joys and results of this 10-year New Paths.
I'm happy you shared that, because I can see where people might think, listening to this, well, I've got to, I just want to be with my family because of COVID or whatever's been happening in their world. I want to be with my family. So they think I'm just going to go with my spouse and my 2 kids, and won't that be great? But what you mentioned, both about sharing the cost, but also the lead time, because a typical family of 4 maybe says, we want to go in 2 months. And we don't care about the cost. You can bring in all these expert speakers. We don't care about the cost, but you got to say to them, look, this needs to be planned ahead. But we just so happen to have a trip that we planned a year ago, a group trip that already has that. And we happen to have 4 spots on that trip. So it gives them an opportunity to go have a trip that they almost really can't do just as a private family. And I hadn't really thought about that, but you're right. Things need to be planned ahead. And if you can plan a year out, you can put together an itinerary that's not just dependent on what rooms are left or what guides are left, and that type of thing. Are you leading a lot of the group trips yourself?
Yes, I do. I do all the new ones every year. There's one trip that I will never stop doing, hopefully. That is Papua New Guinea. That's okay. Papua New Guinea. That's one that I've been doing for 27 years, I believe it is now, during the Mount Hagen Sinsin. I think I'm the oldest leader right now up there. And then I lead all the new ones.
Well, on the Papua New Guinea trip, what is it? What makes you say, I'm always going to do that one? I've done it for 27 years. I'm going to do that as long as I can. What is the draw for you personally to do that?
It's been so long that I have been going there. I have so many friends. It's such a different culture. To be honest, there are not many leaders in the area. and training. The way of life is quite different from the Western world. So really, it's so. But and then it's just so impressive. You see, Papua New Guinea, I really enjoy. I have so many friends. I'm an honorary member of two clans, so there's a special relationship there. I don't think I could let it go.
When are you taking your daughter there?
Hopefully next year. Hopefully in August
I
2025.
was guessing
I'm
with
looking
her
forward.
age, I was guessing it's going to be fairly close. And I says, I can see the look on your face. You look very excited about that. That's going to be a special thing.
No, in Papua New Guinea with the Mount Hagen scene and the Sipics and the Sipik River and the Crocodile Men and the scarification. It's so foreign. And I have seen through years a lot of leaders and guides going through. And there's a lot of information that has been gathered through these decades there that it's not easy to obtain because they are very tight cultures and they will not release this information easily. That's why you will read that, the scarification. I have not ever read any document that has actually said what really happens and how it's done and why it's done. So it's inside information that we gather.
I heard you say the scarification, and I was able to see you kind of with a hand gesture figure out what you're talking about. But anybody listening to this that doesn't have the benefit of seeing your face. So we're talking about scarring, where they will
Correct.
tell us about it.
In the Sipik area, especially in the headwaters, not that much anymore in the main Sipik River, which would be like the Amazon. Just to get an idea, this would be the Amazon, or it's a tropical rainforest, a big river, and of course it has a lot of tributaries that come from the mountains of Papua New Guinea. On the headwaters, the crocodile men live. And this is, Papua New Guinea is a very complex destination. 800 languages, not dialects, languages of the whole planet exist in Papua New Guinea. So you can imagine about the diversity of cultures. One of them is the one of the lowland forest, and their main totem is the crocodile. So they have their spirit houses. Sadly, they are being lost because of, the influence of the outside world, and we can find less and less, even though there are some villages that are keeping them for a while. And these spirit houses in the low first floor, normally there are two floors. There are certain variations. It's not written on stone, but on the first floor, it is the men's house where they carve wood. They're master carvers, and they do politics. And then on the second floor, they keep their totems, their family totems, and the spirits of their ancestors. And also it is there where they practice the scarification, which is done at the time of coming of age of males. But now, and for quite a while, it's also being practiced for different reasons, but it's also being practiced on women, which is quite interesting. And what they do is that it's a very painful process. It's very difficult. This is not a destination for everybody, but the most interesting one of the world, in my opinion. Basically, they cut themselves. By female, their mother's brother, so their uncle, is the one in charge of this. And it's a process of several months where they are put into a training, if you want to say, of mental and physical training in order to become men. And it would be a little bit too long to get into the details of why of the release of blood, but it basically is that they need to release the blood when they were young before becoming adults. But the process is extremely painful, and it's a very, very long process. But that's what they do. And nowadays it's very hard to find them. We take this old boat, but it's built in the resemblance of a spirit house. It's called the Sipik Spirit. And instead of traveling to the main river, as the only boat exploring that area, we go upstream looking for the really remote villages that have been seldom visited by anyone, especially tourists. And I know a couple that I have been going for all these decades, so I have my preferences, but they are quite remote. And there we can see real spirit houses and real crocodile men. And I think that right now we are the only ones doing such a remote experience.
I want to ask you this, and not to turn it into a political conversation, but as I hear you describing it, I just want to ask what you think, because, there's places around the world, but I'm going to use a specific example of places in Africa where they have traditions, both for men and women. Specifically, I'm thinking of traditions that they have for young girls that I think we can all kind of look at that and say, well, that's through our own cultural lens, we can all, I don't know, I can look at it and say, well, that's a horrible tradition that they really need to get rid of. And then when I hear you talking about young boys in Papua New Guinea, it's not a genital thing, but it's still kind of, there's a lot of similarities between the two.
Well,
but I don't jump to this place of, oh, that's horrible, they should stop that. But I don't know if that's because I'm a guy. I don't know. What do you think?
Jason, there's a difference. It's the difference is the option and the reason why it's being done. I think that sadly these girls don't have an option. And it's not that it should have an option. What it's being practiced there, it's a horrible, dominating, life spoiling activity in the case, and certainly it's far away to what happens in New Guinea in this crocodile people. Maybe the logic of blood and pain, it's something that could be related, but people in New Guinea have a choice. It's not that not everybody has to do it. Those who practice it is because of their own beliefs. And even though it's a very difficult experience, it is something that they decide to do for traditional beliefs that they want to maintain. It's not imposed on them, right? And actually, they're very, very proud. And they become the new elders of the community.
And I get that.
Period. And it's a reason of pride.
Yeah, I get that. And it's just where I was like trying to figure out the differences. I can see that, especially with you explaining it, but it's just so, when you have these vast cultural differences, sometimes it's just really hard to get your head around because.
Absolutely. And if there's a place that you will find differences to our way of seeing the world, that is New Guinea. It's not a trip for everybody. It's a very diverse one. It's an impressive one. I highly recommend it to everybody. Again, it's a place that I will keep on going, but it is because of that's. Imagine I just mentioned one of the clans.
Yeah.
I know it's something that passing this information requires quite a bit of time. I was lucky to go several years with people that had experience before. So now it's impossible to say which is your best trip, the place that you like the most. But I would say that Papua New Guinea is by far the most interesting place that I have ever been. And believe it or not, it's the place that people say, I want to go back again for my guests, which is really impressive. I experienced it. That's it. It was an interesting trip. And no, it's actually people at the end of the trip, they say, this was the best travel experience of my life, one of it, and I want to go back.
That says a lot right there when it's like, I want to go back, especially to a place this, I don't know how difficult it is. I mean, it's in Asia, right? So it's a ways away.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure it's not a cheap trip. So for people to say, I've been to this place that's totally different than any other place I've ever went, and I want to go back, as opposed to, okay, been there, done that. Now where's the next great place? Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's
especially
pretty cool.
those who are interested. Remember the birds of paradise for the nature lovers and everybody that loves anthropology. There's no better place if you want to see Stone Age. People in Stone Age era, some of them, not all of them. There's a very advanced people in Port Moresby and the whole thing, but certain areas, people in Stone Age, but with cell phones. So we are seeing a clash of cultures at the same time. And the country is growing fast and building roads because they found natural gas. And so it's a phenomenon that is happening now. And for me, it's quite interesting. Let's remember that these also were the people that are 9,000 years ago, they were the most advanced people in the planet, together with the Omo Valley in Ethiopia, the first places where agriculture was developed. So there's a lot of questions of why they did certain areas that were so advanced before, they didn't continue this advancement, this progression. And those are questions that I still have. So that's probably why.
So you got to keep going back. It's very, very
many places, so many places. Gladly 58 so far with NPE, many more as a leader, but now 58 ones. And we started doing all these remote ones, but we also, as I mentioned, we do Egypt, we do Peru, Kingdoms of Peru. Morocco is very big for us. The Pantanal, the Jaguars of Pantanal. We just celebrated 10 years, providing every single group has had quality sightings of wild jaguars in the Pantanal and Patagonia. So it's been a lot. And when we do more, not mainstream, because we don't do any mainstream, but more common, like Machu Picchu or Egypt destination, not as remote as, or Madagascar, which Madagascar is amazing. We do it in a different way. We look for the new path, right, at each destination with new activities and to really immerse people in their local culture without losing the comforts of our style of living.
What percentage are you mostly doing the group expeditions, or are you doing some private departures for people as well? What's your mix look like?
We do both. I would say that right now it's a 50-50. At the beginning, the first year, it was only groups. And then we had a couple of FITs, as we call them in the industry, private trips. And then it started to grow to, I would say, a good 60-40 before the pandemic. I think that right now we are in the 50-50s. I have to give you a number.
Do you feel like there's good crossover between the private, I know FITs is what we call them, but anybody listening might not know that's just a private, like a couple comes to you, wants to take a trip, you set it up for them, send them on their way, as opposed to the group trip that is set up with set dates and a fixed number of spots. I'm just saying that for anybody that's listening that's wondering what FIT is. Anyway, where I'm going with the question is, do you see much crossover in your client base? Like the people that do the group trips, do they pretty much always and only do group trips? And the people that do the private trips always and only do the private trips? Or do you have quite a few people that maybe go on a private trip with their family, but then they go on one of your group trips and then it just changes around? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It changes. It changes. So there has been, as I mentioned before, there has been an increase of FITs, of private trips, custom trips after the pandemic. But I'm seeing some of them returning. I believe that they want to travel with a family. They have not been traveling with their families for a while. Well, we already passed the bounce years. So they started on the bounce years. They had the rescheduled trips. They took those. Then they did a couple of trips with their families. And now they are doing one with a family and one as a group departure because they also want to see their friends. As I mentioned, we are a little bit of a club. And so that's what's happening right now. So that's so I
also wonder about, the group trips. I have a lot of history with group trips as well. But I'm curious on your take. Like, I know when I worked in the fly fishing travel, so we did mostly fly fishing trips. And oftentimes, my favorite ones were the ones that had activities for, bring your partner, bring your spouse, bring your kids. There's other stuff to do. That was always what I enjoyed the most. And I still just found a lot of guys that would, even if it was a family friendly place, they would join the group trip because their wife didn't like to travel, maybe didn't like to fish, but regardless, wasn't into traveling. So I'd have these guys that would go anywhere with me. They're like, Jason, where are we going next? Where are we going next? And I went on 7 or 8 trips with them, never met their wife, and we were going to places that other guys were bringing their wives. But I guess where I'm going with this is the group trips are kind of nice for the person that just the people in their lives just don't want to go with them for whatever reason, which that's probably we're going to discuss that in a second, that they just don't have people that want to travel with them and they can go out and make friends, figure out where they're going next. Because you and I both know, and probably a lot of our listeners know this, it's the last night at the place you're at and okay, where are we going next? Where are we going next? Jorge, what do you got for us next? And as somebody that works in the business, I remember my mentor always said, Jason, the best place to sell a trip is on a trip, and I know you have that experience as well. So, there's that part. Do you agree with, is that kind of what you see? Is that an important part of your group trip business?
See, in my case, because we balance and we have a lot of activities, to be honest, the spouses normally go together. No?
Okay. Cool.
In my groups, it usually happens when we do specialty trips. We have done a couple of fishing trips, but because someone requested it and we had the logistics to go to Argentina and we know everybody there, we have been doing it for so long. And in those cases, they were very specific. And yes, we could see more guys going for the fishing trip and things like that. Because we really try to balance nature, culture, immersive in the current local culture, not only the archaeology. We do cooking classes, and even though we go to the market, so we try to make it. The idea was when we did the first trip to Ethiopia, the idea is we're going to travel so far just to do one little part of the country. No, we want to have an integral view, a complete view of this destination, rather than just making an escapade. and have a little view. So we try to do them as complete as possible. And so that's what happens with our groups. And gladly, and then they become friends between each other and they decide.
I don't know, because of the nature of what you're doing and what you were just describing, I don't know if you've had many opportunities for this, but I enjoyed the fishing business. I still love to fish. And I also managed a resort, or it's more of a lodge. The word resort doesn't fit. Small lodge, 20 guests, and off the coast of Belize. We had fly fishing. We were well known for fly fishing, but also very good scuba diving. And we had kind of an ecotourism type package because there's so many, we're 30 miles offshore on this atoll, amazing place. And what I found, that was a place that people would bring their wives if their wives are into diving and snorkeling and outdoor stuff. And I always found that, I don't want to say the ladies because that sounds weird, but I'm going to say the non-anglers or the people that were not there to fish were always just so much more fun to be around. I'm not going to lie, because they're just like fishermen. When someone's really, really, really focused on something, which fly fishermen tend to do, they're judged the quality of their day based on the number of fish they caught, the size of the fish they caught, the number of fish they saw, how many times the guide screwed up and didn't put them in the right position. They're just so focused on the fishing. And, they come back at the end of the day and that was all they want to talk about was, can we switch guides? Can we, because we didn't catch as many fish as they did in the other boat or whatever it is. And their traveling companions or the divers, the snorkels, whatever, they come back at the end of the day and like always, it was amazing. Oh, we saw a turtle. We saw this. And it was, and they're just like, and they're all best friends now. They're, you've got this group of women from all over the country that all come together for 1 week in Belize, and they're all best friends. And the guys are all just worried about the fishing and comparing notes. You're sitting at the dinner table and the guys are all talking to each other, comparing notes about their fishing day. And the ladies are talking about their family, their grandkids, they're just whatever. They're just like all best friends all of a sudden. So I don't know if any of your trips, if that resonates with anything you guys have tried to do.
You made me remember when I used to lead for previous companies, and now we balance it because I think that in the diversity there's the taste, the good taste. I'm literal translating from Spanish, but I think that a little bit of everything is something that makes life a little bit brighter. That's my opinion. But you made me remember hardcore birding groups.
Birders. Yes, that's the other one.
I did a lot of that, especially the Amazon, and I did it for many years, a decade and a half to good 2 decades, and it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and especially if you like wildlife photography, of course, it was a dream, and always looking for that same species. I don't care if I see it 20 times, but I'm looking for the light on the species, but just for the observation of it. And please don't misunderstand me, all my hardcore birding friends, and I love it. But yes, getting after that to the dinner and then discussing if the bird had a feather on the chin or not, and that will classify them, and having a discussion about that, and sometimes a little bit emotional.
Yeah.
You can get that's a little bit too much for me.
Yeah, that's I haven't been around a lot of birders, but I get that. I think my impression is they're pretty serious about which is great. There's no downside to that. It's great if people are going and exploring and they are inspired to protect environments and they are getting out and exploring the world, making connections.
Sorry.
I'm not sure it matters what got them there. I mean, and I definitely always felt that way. The fishing was the best. I think someone said it once, like the best thing about trout fishing is that trout live in beautiful places. Kind of like we go to these places and the excuse can be, I want to go fishing, but you find yourself in these amazing places with interesting people. And, so so I'm saying that because I've interviewed a few fly fishermen for the podcast, and I know I've got an audience that listens that's into fly fishing, and that's cool. I still love it. And if you are that guy that I just described, next time you go on a trip like this with your wife, it's great that you pick a place that she likes as well, but take 1 day. And, that's what I always wanted my clients to do when they'd be at the fishing lodge. They fished for 6 days straight from 8 a.m. till 5 or 6 p.m. and just take 1 day and go with the group that's going snorkeling or looking for manatees, or go do a scuba diving course with your wife or something. And you'll see what I'm talking about if you haven't done it. So anyway, thanks for going on that path. Hey, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is, like with group trips, sometimes people have these ideas. I don't want to go on a group group trip, you gave us some good reasons for why you might want to go on a group trip, but the barriers are equally important. And I think that sometimes it's like, I don't want to be on a group trip because I won't know anybody. I don't want to be on a group trip because I don't want to go on a group trip and there's one really obnoxious person on the group trip that spoils it for everybody. Like if I go with my family, I have some control. Whether I like my family or not, at least I know who I'm going with. They know me, I know them. So what would you want to tell somebody that hasn't been on a group trip, that has those concerns, or if there's other concerns you'd like to mention that would kind of help them think, oh, well, maybe I should do this?
See, thank you for the question, because it's well, first, we do private trips as mentioned, and we can arrange them for everybody, and especially with all the connections and the curating, very careful curation of our trips that we occur. But especially in groups that are small, like the ones New Paths Expeditions offers. We're talking about 10 persons, 12 persons. So it's not a massive group. It's very different than getting on those buses and then the guide with the flag, just the whistle, I am here. Gladly now
oh my God, that would kill me.
With the microphones. Gladly now, finally, the microphones have appeared. Because we do go, to the tombs and the mosques in Morocco, for example. And you get across those big groups. And oh my God, I wish I should have arrived to before. But now they are a little quieter. So that's not the reality. It's like talking, and I heard one of your podcasts, we also do small ships in Galapagos, in Patagonia, and in the Amazon. One thing is, what is a small ship? What is a big group? We do really small, So, and there you will normally become friends. And the other thing is that people that take trips in the style and the design of the trips that we do are normally people that are, they are quite interested in the destination. They really want to learn. These are not vacations to go and relax on the beach. This is people that really want to learn. They really want to experience. And normally that attracts like-minded travelers. It's really rare that we have someone that is a problem. I'm not going to say that it has never happened, but it has been very, very few. Normally the group takes care of it because it's such a small group that eventually, and then the leaders, that's why all our leaders have to have more than 25 years of experience in the field, leading expeditions, all of our leaders. And
that's impressive.
With very few exceptions, and they all have to have a master's degree or a PhD. And our local guides, with few exceptions, there are some very young, exceptional guides that we have promoted them faster than others because of their incredible capacities and abilities. But normally our guides have 15 years of experience. A lot of what I'm pretty sure that you know this very well. A lot of what we do is not just taking the groups and checking in to a hotel, checking out and calling the guide and being sure that the bus is on time. Most of our work.
You're a counselor, guy. It's like
correct.
Medical doctor sometimes when people step on things. Social coordinator, matchmaker.
So it is our job to make it
relationship
work.
Counselor.
It happens.
I know it happens. I've seen it.
So far,
I remember
together.
I remember, all at once. Yeah, we were 30 miles offshore. We had people fall down, get hurt, and it's like all kinds of, or the person that decides to go back to drinking after 10 years of soberness, out on an island that you're like, man, this is going to be a challenge. I remember we had one. We had one lady. She got there with her family. So it was her husband, and her two kids that were probably around 10, 11, 12, something like that. And it's a week to week. It's a Saturday to Saturday. And I remember I went out to the boat dock to meet the group as they were coming in. They're getting off the boat. And I'm greeting everybody. And I put out my hand. She gave me her hand, but she looked at me and said, I do not want to be here. This was not my idea, and I'm not going to enjoy myself. Wow, this is 30 seconds into the trip.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh boy. So that's, and as a lodge manager, you're a trip leader. It's the same exact thing. And I remember, I was like, okay, but by the end of the week, she was the one giving all the hugs. She was the one that knew everybody's name, knew all about their kids, and was just smiling and so happy. And she said, I know, Jason, I know I told you that I didn't want to be here, but this was great. Thank you so much. And that didn't just happen by itself.
Congratulations.
Both my fiance at the time, who later became my wife, we were there managing a place together. We both looked at each other. Okay, we know what our job is this week. We're going to send her home happy, whether she wants to or not. So it's an important thing. And the reason Yeah, go
that's
ahead.
something that, what you did there. That's and not everybody can be a leader. Sorry, it's not everybody can be a leader. There's a cut of personality. That's what we do. No, that's our effort, and that's why I think that traveling with groups, to go back to your question, it's a great option, especially if you know where you're getting. If you want to learn a destination, if you want to experience it, and really have unique events, things that you will not see, not even if you have a local friend, and really get unique experiences. Again, like being at the Sphinx in the morning at sunrise with Saki Hawass and all this. That's something that you can achieve in this small group.
Well, the other consideration that just kind of I came up with is you can do a private group, a private departure. You can put together an FIT for a family. But usually, and I don't know, maybe yours are different, so correct me if I'm wrong, but usually the FIT is like, okay, we've got someone to pick you up at the airport, take you to your hotel. You get checked in your hotel. We've got a tour arranged the following day. And then we've got to transfer to another place. And so we put together all the parts. But what you sometimes lack in that, and the FITs that I'm familiar with, is that consistency also. That there's many, many times when you're in a private group, this might sound appealing, and maybe it is to some people, but there's many times in a private group where you're kind of in between the transfer driver and the guide, and you're a little bit on your own, and there's not really that consistency there. Maybe, depending on the trip, maybe this is your night, you're on your own for dinner type of thing, which most people can kind of figure out. But with the group, what's pretty cool is there's usually one person, maybe more depending on but there's usually one person that provides that consistency throughout. So that, like, I can't remember what we're doing next. Where's Jason? There's Jason over there talking to the rest of the group. And hey, Jason, I know I've got my itinerary, but I don't know where it is. What are we doing tomorrow? What time, And there's that consistency throughout. So, you've always got somebody, the same person. You figure out each other's personalities. And what's also great about a group is most of the time, maybe the smaller ships, it's a little harder, but most of the time you can kind of go have some privacy and have some space. If you want to step away and go try and do an adventurous dinner on your own that night or something, usually, so you've got kind of the best of both worlds. That's just my thought. I mean,
that has to be built. Something that we do when we design these trips, which, by the way, some of them take up to 2 years to design. And then the private ones really take advantage of the design that has been made before. We do custom trips because of personal interest, and they want more of a particular type of activity. And we change them. Some of these trips, to be able to include all this and to have all the basic, we need 3-4 scoutings of the trip. We really invest in the design of these trips. And that's something that I love doing. And certain trips, I repeat, it's up to 2 years to get them to be perfect and maximize the amount of time, and not having one night, and making them have the right pacing. Pacing for us is so important. Safety, security, pace. It's so important that people have their private enough downtime, but not too much that everybody gets bored. And also that you have here and there, we normally include all the meals. But if we are in this particular city that has these wonderful restaurants and there are many options, that meals, we won't include it, not because we don't want, but we feel that night, maybe the couples want to go out, or maybe, the 2 couple friends want to go to have this type of food and the others want a little bit more sophisticated one. So we think about all these things. And one thing that I do want,
or you might get two couples that met on that trip that have some similar interests. They're they're really all into Italian food, and then they want to, go, the 2 couples, whatever. And then you've got the trip leader there to, I don't want to say round up, but to make sure that nobody feels left out. If they don't want to be left out. If someone wants to go off by themselves, fine. But what you don't want is the clique thing is hard. The social cliques that happen in society sometimes happen in the small groups. Not too bad. I don't think a group of 10 to 12, I don't think it happens very often because it's small enough that you can all have that intimacy. It's probably when you have a group of 20 or 30 where you're going to get 3 or 4 cliques, and then you've got that one guy who just, whatever reason, he's obnoxious, whatever.
Gladly that doesn't happen with us because of the trip. And something that you see, so it's very important that you leave all these things and that we have a leader there. But on the private trips, something that we are doing, and we have been able to achieve it not long ago, to be honest, but we are working on departures that we have one guide, so a leader, with our standards, even for departures of 2 persons.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that's a good, that can be a good fix.
Patagonia, we have this wonderful Patagonia itinerary, new one with this incredible hotel that is outside the national park of Torres del Paine, but it's half the size of the park. It's exactly the same nature with same views of the Paine Towers. And I think we are the only company that has it included in its Patagonia as a group departure. But we can depart with as little as 2 and with any trained leader with the characteristics. No. Pantanal, also, we had 4 departures of 2 persons, and it's the same leader. It's not what you mentioned, no? That you go from the airport, you arrive to one place, and you have one guide who, okay, he's clicking his hours. He's a good guide. He has a good explanation about the museum or something like that, leaves you at the hotel. Bye-bye. Tomorrow there's another one. It's a different experience to have somebody that is reading you, that learns your preferences, and really works hard to provide and fix anything that you might not like, because we are all different. So we have that there. We have that in Guatemala with 2 persons, Peru, Morocco. So we are working now in trying to create these trips that people can take them in even smaller groups with the same service of one of our bigger groups, which are 10 persons.
Yeah. And I think anybody listening to this can recognize the challenges that can present, instead of just saying, well, why don't you do that with everybody? Why doesn't everybody have the one guide for the entire time? Because there's challenges, because a lot of these guides in these places, that's just not what they don't go spend a week with you. They've got family. They're used to doing day trips. You got to find somebody that is willing and able. I think able is a super important part, but also willing to go spend a week away from their family. Now you've got accommodations. You got to find accommodations for these guides. You've got sometimes more transportational issues. So it can be a little bit more complicated.
It is
and
tricky.
I'm happy it came up, because that can be very worthwhile, especially if they're going somewhere. I've never been to Morocco. I have no idea. I don't know if that's an easy place. I'm pretty comfortable traveling anywhere by myself. But if you're going somewhere that's a little bit more complicated, it might be nice to have that peace of mind of having someone, even Guatemala.
Absolutely. It is difficult because there's regulations, country regulations. Sometimes you have one person, then you have to have the guide that is going, and then the guide that is local. And so it can add up. And then hotels. So then where do
regulations,
the flights, and we don't want to make it even extra expensive. We want it to keep the same price as a group, as a private or small. Working all that, it has taken a while, working with all our partners, hotels and transport companies. And we have come with very, very nice deals and agreements in order to make this happen, so that because
I'm thinking of an example of what you're saying about the complication, regulations, politics, whatever, all these things, right? One of just an example is like, you've got a great guide that also has transportation, whatever. He's going to be transporting them and guiding them, let's just say hypothetically. But he can't pick them up at the airport because there's a union, there's the transfer drivers, the taxi drivers. You got to have a permit to pick people up at the airport. And in order to get the permit, you have to have this and that. And it might not be relevant to this guide's normal data, And it's a kind of a job creation scheme you see in a lot of parts of the world. It's like, okay, you're a taxi driver. You got to have this regulation to be a taxi driver. And then if you're going to guide somebody, you got to be this person. If you want to take, it's just so complicated to get one person that can do all that without pissing off the other people. Because if you've got the day guides, there's a lot of day guides, let's say in Cusco, let's just say Cusco, bunch of day guides that just do day trips. And then they see some guy out with a group for 3 or 4 days at 3 or 4 places, and they get all worked up because, well, this is my turf, right? It's kind of that pissing match or that turf thing. But anyway.
And then when you have border crossings in certain countries, in certain countries, so the vehicle cannot enter and you have to switch vehicles. And there used to have it's much more relaxed nowadays. But before, we used to have quite a bit of those. And of course, destinations like Patagonia or this Atacama, Uyuni, Titicaca trip. So it's Chile, Bolivia, and Peru with Uyuni Salt Lake. Every time we got to a border, so we could not take the same guide from each country, right? And we wanted to use one. Oh, no, he's from this nationality. You cannot enter. So
or try and convince the border crossing guy that, no, I'm not their guide. I'm just their friend traveling with them. I'm sure that's never happened. But anyway, been a fun conversation. Or I think we could just keep talking forever. You have enough destinations, enough experience. We should probably do a whole podcast series just, for your business and connect with some of the people that have been traveling. Anyway, my point is there's a lot of great stuff to discuss. I'm curious, is there anything I forgot to ask you, should have asked you, or that you want to make sure that we cover before we wrap it up?
Well, it's been a fantastic talk, and yes, I could keep on chatting with you. I hope we get you to visit Machu Picchu while I'm still in Peru, and we can do it in person. But no, really, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for everybody that has been listening to this. We do what we do with a lot of passion. And by the way, one thing that I didn't mention is that we are working now. Like I'm the single parent of this beautiful, wonderful travel companion that is my 12-year-old daughter, Josefina, and she has been my assistant leader in a few of our trips. In India, she has already have moved quite a bit. So we are planning. I do want to mention this. Stay tuned because I'll have a look, because I'm still deciding if it's going to be a different brand or part of New Paths. But we already got a lot of experience traveling with a younger person. Uh-huh. So I think that the family trips that we're thinking for Patagonia, for Morocco, Guatemala, Galapagos, learning experiences with activities tailored to the kids, but also that the parents can go enjoy themselves. We'll take care of everything, and but they will be fun learning experience, and that's something that we're working very, very hard. It's not ready yet. We have some destinations, 4 destinations already selected that we are working into every single activity, microscopes and the Amazon, and it's something that we want to work. And then in New Paths, I hope that everybody can get a minute and visit our website and check our wonderful trips, because we and if you like to travel, if you are experienced in traveling in third world countries and have an open mind, and we are very flexible. We adapt to everybody's needs, and we really work hard to try to provide the best travel experience that it is possible, respecting each destination. So I hope that they get to visit.
Love it. A couple of things. Sounds like Josefina is going to be your co-host on these trips, and that's pretty exciting. That's co-trip leader, and
the family
trips. That's super exciting. And I think there's a great opportunity for trips like that, because families with young kids usually can't go on group trips, because, that can be a real challenge, and to have a group trip that works well for everybody in the age range, down to whatever. I mean, probably don't need the 2-year-olds, but I don't know. That's up to you.
No.
Anyway,
no.
But and I also wanted to mention your website is great. So anybody who's listening to this that's thinking, oh, maybe I should go look at it, because there's a lot of information, well presented. I adventure travel marketing stuff. I was impressed by your website. It looks great.
Thank you, sir.
And I look forward to working on some projects with you in the future. Jorge, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you everybody for listening. I hope we didn't bore you, and Jason, really a pleasure to meet you, and hopefully we can do it in person.
Well, if they're still listening, we didn't bore them, because it's a podcast. They can turn it off pretty quick and easy. So we might just be speaking to ourselves right now. I don't know, but anyway, if anybody that is listening to this, thanks for making it to the end with it. Thanks, Jorge. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.